The space station called Zenith floated above a giant planet named Colmar 7. This station was special. Scientists from hundreds of different alien species came here to study old languages and solve puzzles that nobody could understand. For 847 cycles, the smartest minds in the galaxy worked here together. 6 months ago, someone found something strange floating in deep space. They called it the Voidstone artifact. It looked like a big crystal covered with symbols that nobody recognized. The artifact made strange lights and sent out energy waves. Everyone believed it had an important message inside, maybe a warning about danger. The Council of 10 Minds worked on this mystery every single day. Dr. Veltherix led the team. He was a Krell, an insect-like alien who was very good at finding patterns. His mind could see connections that others missed. But even after 6 months, he could not read the Voidstone symbols. This made him very frustrated. Scholar Thisseron also worked on the artifact. She was a Nathari, a being made of gas who floated in the air. Her species could think about 17 different things at the same time. She felt sure the council would solve the puzzle soon. They just needed more time and more analysis. Another member was Chronicler Bix. This small creature looked like a living crystal. His species never forgot anything they saw or heard. Bix remembered every attempt the council made to decode the artifact. He could tell you exactly what they tried on day 1, day 50, or day 120. One day, a human arrived at the station. His name was Daehyun. He came to fix broken equipment and check the power systems. He was a maintenance engineer, not a scientist. He wore simple work clothes and carried a toolbox. Humans were new to the galaxy. Most aliens thought humans were strong because they came from Earth, a very dangerous planet. But aliens did not think humans were very smart. They saw humans as good workers and soldiers, nothing more. Daehyun did not care what the aliens thought. He just wanted to do his job and maybe learn some interesting things. The station was full of amazing technology and strange beings. Everything here was new to him. One afternoon, Daehyun worked near the artifact chamber. He needed to fix a power coupling that kept overheating. While he worked, he could hear the council talking inside the room. They sounded upset. Another test had failed. Another theory was wrong. Daehyun felt curious. He walked to the door and looked inside. The Voidstone sat on a table glowing with blue and green light. The symbols on its surface moved slowly, like water flowing. It was beautiful and mysterious. Dr. Veltherix noticed Daehyun at the door. The Krell's antennae twitched with annoyance. But then he had an idea. Maybe showing the artifact to the human would give the council a short break. Everyone was tired and frustrated. The doctor waved Daehyun inside. Several council members looked surprised. Tisserand swirled her gaseous body in confusion. Why was a maintenance worker entering their research chamber? Daehyun walked up to the artifact slowly. He did not touch it. He just looked at the symbols, studying them from different angles. The council members watched him with amusement. One scholar laughed quietly. Another made a joke about Deathworlder instincts. Tisserand spoke in a voice like wind through trees. She said maybe Daehyun's survival instincts would sense danger that they could not see. Other scholars smiled. They meant it as a joke. Humans were famous for surviving dangerous situations, not for solving complex puzzles. Daehyun kept looking at the artifact. 30 seconds passed. Then 40. He tilted his head to one side the way people do when something suddenly makes sense. Then he spoke. He said it looked like mathematics using base 12 counting, with symbols that showed sounds. The third column of symbols seemed to show coordinates in space with timestamps attached. His voice was casual, like he was talking about the weather. The room became completely silent. Every being in the chamber stopped moving. Dr. Veltherix's mandibles froze in mid-click. Chronicler Bix's crystal body stopped glowing for a moment, something that rarely happened. Tisserand was the first to speak. She said that was impossible. The council had tested every mathematical system from 4,000 different civilizations. They had tried base 8, base 10, base 16, and hundreds of other systems. Nothing worked. Daehyun shrugged. He said he might be wrong, but that was what it looked like to him. The pattern was right there in the symbols. Could he borrow a datapad to show them? The council members looked at each other. Some started arguing. A few laughed nervously. Others demanded that Daehyun explain himself properly. Dr. Veltherix made a clicking sound that meant extreme agitation in Krell language. 6 months of work, and now a human maintenance worker was telling them the answer. But something in Daehyun's calm voice made them pause. He did not sound like he was joking. He sounded completely certain. And after 6 months of failure, what did they have to lose by listening? Scholar Tisserand handed Daehyun a datapad, though her gaseous form flickered with doubt. She told him to show them what he meant, but she warned him not to waste their time with guesses. Daehyun took the pad and started working. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, drawing lines and making notes. The council watched in silence, their earlier amusement replaced by something else. Curiosity, and perhaps just a tiny bit of hope. Daehyun worked on the datapad for 4 minutes. The council members stood around him watching every move. Some whispered to each other. Others stayed quiet, their alien faces showing confusion and interest. First, Daehyun pointed to the recurring pattern of 12 marks that appeared throughout the artifact. The council had seen these marks before. They thought the marks were just decoration, something artistic. Daehyun said no. These marks were numbers. They were a counting system based on 12, not 10 like humans usually used. Next, he showed them the small curves and lines that the council had called ornamental flourishes. Daehyun said these were not art. They were phonetic markers, symbols that showed how to say the sounds. They modified the base numbers, giving them meaning. Then Daehyun did something that surprised everyone. He held the datapad near the artifact and recorded its energy pulses. The artifact had been making these pulses since it was discovered. The council filtered them out as background noise. They thought the pulses had no meaning, but Daehyun heard something different. He said the pulses were not random. They came in a rhythm like a beat in music. They were timed to match the symbols on the surface, like a clock keeping time, like a drummer keeping rhythm. Dr. Veltherix made a sharp clicking sound. His mind raced through the implications. Could they have been filtering out the key to the puzzle this entire time? Daehyun took all 3 pieces of information and combined them. He matched the base 12 numbers to the pulse timing. He applied the phonetic markers. On his simple datapad, which the scholars thought was primitive technology, he mapped everything together. 4 minutes after he started, Daehyun looked up from the pad. He had results. The chamber fell completely silent. He showed them a partial translation. The words appeared on the pad in Galactic Standard Language. They read, "Convergence Event Sector 9. Avoid spatial coordinates," Daehyun continued. He had also found a star map hidden in the symbols. It pointed to an area of space that was not on any current charts. An unmapped region beyond the outer rim. And there was more. A countdown. If his calculations were correct, something big would happen in about 90 galactic cycles. Not much time at all, the council exploded into chaos. Scholars shouted questions. Some said this must be a mistake. Others demanded to verify the data immediately. Chronicler Bix's crystal body flashed with colors that meant cognitive dissonance. When information contradicted everything you believed, Tisserand swirled faster, her gaseous form moving in agitated patterns. She said they must check this human's work. They must run it through their own systems. This could not be real. Dr. Veltherix took the datapad from Daehyun with trembling appendages. He connected it to the station's main computer system. The whole council gathered around the screens. They ran test after test. They checked every calculation. They verified every assumption. 2 hours passed. The results came back one by one. Every single check confirmed what Daehyun had found. His translation was accurate. His star map was correct. His countdown was real. Dr. Veltherix stopped moving completely. This was a Krell condition called analysis paralysis. It happened when their minds received too much contradictory information at once. His logical brain could not accept that a human had solved in minutes what the galaxy's finest minds could not solve in 6 months. Other council members sat down slowly, their bodies showing shock and disbelief in different alien ways. Some remained standing but said nothing. The silence felt heavy. Finally, Tisserand spoke. Her voice was quieter now, less certain. She asked the question that everyone was thinking. How did this happen? How did a Deathworlder maintenance worker solve an impossible puzzle? What did he know that they did not? Daehyun looked uncomfortable with all the attention. He scratched the back of his neck, a human gesture of nervousness. He said he did not really know how to explain it. The pattern just made sense to him, like those puzzle games that human children played. You looked at it and your brain just saw the answer. This answer did not satisfy anyone. Chronicler Bix asked for more details. How exactly did his brain see the answer? What process did he use? What methodology? Daehyun tried to explain. He said when he looked at the 12-mark pattern, it reminded him of how people used to count dozens back on Earth. 12 things in a group. And the curves looked like accent marks in written language, showing how to pronounce words. The pulses sounded like the beat when he used to play drums as a kid. So his brain connected all three things automatically. He spoke like it was simple, like anyone could have done it. But the scholars knew better. They had 6 months to make these connections. Thousands of hours, billions of calculations. And they found nothing. Dr. Veltherix slowly recovered from his paralysis. He looked at Daehyun with new eyes. The Krell said they needed to understand this. The station director must be informed. Other experts must study what happened here. This was too important to ignore. Word spread quickly through the station. Within hours, everyone knew that a human had decoded the Void Stone. Scientists stopped their work to discuss it. Station workers whispered in hallways. Some did not believe it. Others felt excited. A few felt threatened. Administrator Queln called an emergency meeting. She was a Vorash, a diplomatic species that ran most galactic bureaucracy. She arrived at the artifact chamber with several officials and security personnel. The administrator listened to Dr. Veltherix explain what happened. She read the translation herself. She looked at Daehyun for a long moment. Then she made a decision. She said they needed answers. They needed to understand why a human could do this. She contacted Earth's diplomatic corps immediately. She requested a specialist, someone who understood human psychology and cognition, someone who could explain this mystery. Meanwhile, Daehyun stood awkwardly in the corner of the chamber. He did not feel like a hero. He felt confused and a little overwhelmed. All he did was look at some symbols and share what he saw. Why was everyone making such a big deal about it? But deep down, even Daehyun could feel that something had changed. The way the aliens looked at him now was different. Not with amusement or dismissal, with something else. Something like respect, and maybe a little bit of fear. 2 days later, Dr. Mireille arrived from Earth. She was a human xenopsychologist who studied how different species thought and solved problems. Administrator Queln brought her directly to the artifact chamber where Daehyun waited. Mireille was a calm professional woman who carried herself with quiet confidence. She greeted Daehyun warmly in their shared human language, then switched to Galactic Standard for the others. She told the council she would need time to interview Daehyun and analyze what happened. For 3 days, Mireille asked Daehyun hundreds of questions. She showed him different puzzles and patterns. She recorded his responses and measured his reaction times. She asked about his childhood, his education, his hobbies. Daehyun found it all very strange but cooperated. Finally, Mireille presented her findings to the council. She stood before the assembled scholars with confidence. She told them she had identified several key factors that explained Daehyun's success. First, she talked about pattern recognition under pressure. Humans evolved on Earth, a planet full of dangers. Missing a pattern could mean death. Was that movement in the tall grass a hunting animal? Was that plant safe to eat? Human brains became very good at spotting patterns quickly, especially when time was limited. The council had spent months carefully analyzing the artifact, but Mireille said this slow, careful approach actually worked against them. They overthought the problem. Daehyun looked at it quickly and trusted his first impression. His Deathworlder instincts kicked in. Second, she explained cognitive flexibility. Most galactic species specialized in specific types of thinking. The Krell were amazing at sequential pattern analysis following logical steps. The Netheri could process many things at once. But humans were generalists. They were decent at many things rather than perfect at one thing. This generalist brain structure let humans switch between different ways of thinking very quickly. Daehyun looked at the symbols as numbers, then as language, then as music, all within seconds. Most aliens could not do this. Third, Mireille talked about intuitive leaps. Humans made decisions based on gut feelings and incomplete information. This was another survival trait from their dangerous planet. Other species needed lots of proof before drawing conclusions. They wanted to be 87% certain before deciding anything. But humans often acted on 40% certainty and figured things out as they went. Daehyun did not prove his theory before speaking. He saw a pattern and trusted his instinct that it was correct. Then he checked it afterward. Fourth came an interesting detail about base 12 mathematics. Mirai explained that humans used to count in groups of 12 very often in their history. 12 months in a year, 12 hours on a clock face, 12 inches in a foot. They called it a dozen. Most humans now used base 10 counting for everyday things, but the cultural memory of base 12 remained in their language and customs. Most galactic species used base 8 or base 16 systems. The Council never seriously considered base 12 because they thought it was too uncommon. Fifth, Mirai asked Daehyun about music. He mentioned that he played drums when he was younger. She explained that humans understood rhythm and pattern through music in ways most species did not. Music was deeply connected to human language, emotion, and memory. The artifact's energy pulses created a rhythm. Most scholars filtered this out as meaningless background noise, but Daehyun's brain automatically heard it as a beat like music. His mind synced to it without him even realizing. When Mirai finished her presentation, the Council sat in stunned silence. The implications were uncomfortable. The galaxy's academic elite had failed because they were too intelligent, too specialized, too methodical. They built complex theories when the answer was simple. Thesaron struggled with this information. Her gaseous form swirled with agitation. She asked if Mirai was saying that ignorance was better than knowledge. That less education was superior to more education. Mirai shook her head firmly. No, that was not what she meant. She explained that knowledge was valuable. Education was important, but rigid knowledge could create blind spots. When you became too certain about your methods, you stopped seeing other possibilities. She used a human expression, thinking outside the box. The Council had built a very sophisticated box around the problem and stayed inside it. They used advanced equipment, complex theories, and established methodologies. All good things. But these same tools prevented them from seeing a simple solution. Dr. Veltherix clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. He asked if this meant they should abandon their careful scientific methods. Should they just guess at answers instead of proving them? Again, Mirai said no. Both approaches had value. The key was cognitive diversity, having different types of minds working together. Daehyun made an intuitive leap. The Council verified it with rigorous testing. Both steps were necessary. Either alone was enough. Chronicler Bix's crystal body flashed with understanding. He said this made sense from a survival perspective. Civilizations that thought in only one way would eventually face problems they could not solve. Diversity of thought was a survival advantage. The Council began discussing the implications. If humans could see patterns that other species missed, what else might they be capable of? Should universities recruit more human professors? Should research teams include humans alongside other specialists? While they talked, an urgent message came through the communication system. It was from Daehyun. He had continued working with the artifact on his own, and he found something new, something the Council had completely missed. The message was not just a warning. It was also an invitation, or maybe a threat. The translation was still unclear, but there was definitely more to the message than just coordinates and a countdown. Administrator Queln stood up immediately. She ordered everyone to return to the artifact chamber. If there was more information hidden in the Voidstone, they needed to know about it right now. As the Council rushed to the chamber, Mirai walked beside Dr. Veltharix. The Krell asked her quietly if all humans were like Daehyun. Could any human do what he did? Mirai thought about this carefully. She said every human was different, just like every Krell was different. But yes, many humans had these pattern recognition abilities to some degree. It came from surviving on a death world. Their brains adapted to see danger, find food, and solve problems quickly. Dr. Veltherix walked in silence for a moment. Then he admitted something that was hard for him to say. He had underestimated humans. He had dismissed them as intellectually inferior. He was wrong, and he was grateful for being wrong, because Daehyun might have just saved them all from a danger they did not even know existed. They reached the chamber. Daehyun stood at the artifact with his datapad, looking tired but excited. He had been working all night. The screens around him showed new translations, new patterns, new discoveries, and what he found would change everything. Daehyun had spent the entire night working on the artifact. He barely slept. Something about the symbols kept pulling him back to the chamber. He could not explain why, but he felt like the artifact was trying to tell him something more. The Council gathered around him as he explained his new findings. Administrator Queln also came, along with Admiral Corvin from the Galactic Defense Fleet. If this involved a potential threat, the military needed to know. Daehyun had decoded about 60% of the full message now. He showed them the translation on the large display screen. The words appeared slowly and everyone read them in complete silence. The message said, "Convergence event imminent. Sector 9 spatial. Coordinates. Temporal window 90. Cycles." This message repeats every $50,000. Revolutions warning to successor. Species the architects return prepare or perish. Survival protocol encoded. Pattern recognition. Required, seek the harmonic. The chamber erupted with voices. Everyone spoke at once. Admiral Corvin demanded to know who the architects were. Dr. Veltherix wanted clarification on the survival protocol. Tisserand asked about the harmonic. Chronicler Bix raised one crystalline appendage for attention. His species had perfect memory, and he remembered something important. The architects were mentioned in ancient myths from dozens of different civilizations. They were described as a mysterious precursor race that vanished millions of years ago. No one knew what happened to them. Some stories said the architects built the first stargates. Others claimed they created life on many worlds. But all the myths agreed on one thing. The architects were incredibly advanced and then suddenly disappeared without explanation. Daehyun pointed to another part of the translation. The message said it had been repeating for hundreds of thousands of years. This was not the first warning. The architects had been broadcasting this message since long before any current civilization existed, but no one ever decoded it until now. Admiral Corvin studied the spatial coordinates carefully. His military mind immediately recognized the location. The coordinates pointed to an area called the Silence, a region of space where sensor equipment failed and ships disappeared. The galactic military had declared it a forbidden zone centuries ago. No one went there anymore. The timeline was also concerning. 90 cycles was not much time. Whatever this convergence event was, it would happen soon. And the message said to prepare or perish. That sounded like a serious threat. But there was also hope in the message. It mentioned a survival protocol, some kind of instruction for how to survive the convergence. The protocol was encoded deeper in the artifact, and it required pattern recognition to access. This explained why no one had found it before. You needed a mind like Daehyun's to unlock it. Administrator Queln made a quick decision. She classified all this information as restricted. If hostile beings were returning to the galaxy, they needed time to prepare. Panic would help no one. But she also knew they could not keep Daehyun's achievement completely secret. Too many people already knew about it. A compromise was reached. Daehyun would continue working on the artifact with the Council's full support. His success would be officially credited but described as collaborative research. In exchange for his cooperation, Daehyun would receive a full researcher position with proper pay and resources. Daehyun did not care much about the credit or recognition, but he wanted to keep working on the puzzle. The artifact fascinated him now. He needed to know what the survival protocol said. He needed to understand what was coming. Administrator Queln formed a new research team specifically for this task. She chose members carefully, looking for cognitive diversity. They needed different types of minds working together. The team included Daehyun for his pattern recognition abilities. Dr. Veltherix joined to provide rigorous scientific analysis. Dr. Mireille would help translate between human intuitive thinking and alien logical processes. Chronicler Bix would provide access to ancient knowledge and perfect records of their work. They also called in another human from Earth. His name was Jinwoo, and he was both a musician and a mathematician. The message mentioned seeking the harmonic. If that meant music or sound patterns, Jinwoo might be able to help. Jinwoo arrived 3 days later. He was younger than Daehyun, energetic and curious. He immediately bonded with Daehyun over their shared human culture, but he also impressed the alien scholars with his knowledge of mathematical patterns in music. The team worked together around the clock. They had 90 cycles to decode the survival protocol, 90 cycles to determine if the convergence was a threat or an opportunity, 90 cycles to prepare the entire galaxy for what was coming. Progress was slow but steady. Daehyun continued to have breakthroughs, seeing patterns that others missed. But now he had support. When he made an intuitive leap, Veltherix verified it scientifically. When he struggled to explain his reasoning, Mireille helped translate his thoughts into words the aliens could understand. As the days passed, Daehyun began experiencing something strange. He started having dreams about geometric patterns and coordinates in deep space. The dreams felt vivid and real. He would wake up with images burned into his mind, and sometimes these images helped him decode more of the artifact. Daehyun did not tell anyone about the dreams at first. He worried they would think something was wrong with him. Maybe the artifact was affecting his brain somehow. Maybe the exposure was dangerous, but the dreams kept coming night after night, and they always showed him something useful. New patterns. New connections. It was like the artifact was teaching him directly, speaking to his sleeping mind in a language below words. One morning, after a particularly intense dream, Daehyun woke with absolute certainty. He knew where to find the next layer of the message. He rushed to the artifact chamber before breakfast, startling the night shift guards. He worked for 2 hours alone, following the pattern from his dream. When the rest of the team arrived, they found him staring at a new section of symbols that glowed faintly. These symbols had not been visible before. Dr. Mirai immediately noticed something was different about Daehyun. He looked tired but also strangely focused. His eyes had a distant quality, like he was seeing something beyond the physical artifact. She pulled him aside privately and asked if he was feeling okay. Daehyun hesitated, then told her about the dreams. He expected her to be worried or skeptical. Instead, she looked thoughtful. Mirai said they should run medical scans on him. Not because something was wrong, but because something might be changing. The artifact could be interacting with his brain in ways they did not understand. If so, they needed to document it carefully. The medical scans revealed something surprising. Daehyun's brain showed subtle changes in the regions responsible for pattern recognition and spatial awareness. The artifact's energy signature matched the new neural patterns exactly. The artifact was not harming him. It was attuning him, making his mind more receptive to its message. This discovery was both exciting and concerning. Exciting because it meant Daehyun might be able to decode the entire artifact eventually. Concerning because they did not know what the long-term effects might be. But there was no time to stop now. The countdown continued, 87 cycles remaining, and they were finally getting close to unlocking the survival protocol. 3 weeks passed since Daehyun first decoded the artifact. The team worked together every day, slowly uncovering more of the message. They made progress, but the survival protocol remained locked. They were missing something important. Jinwoo spent his time studying the artifact's energy pulses. He used special equipment that could detect sounds too low for most species to hear. What he found amazed everyone. The artifact was not just pulsing, it was singing. A complex song played continuously, hidden beneath the surface. The song was mathematical, built from harmonic frequencies that created patterns. Jinwoo recorded it and played it back for the team. Most of them heard just strange tones. But Daehyun reacted immediately. His whole body tensed. His eyes widened. The song matched his dreams. Every note, every pattern. This was what his sleeping mind had been trying to tell him. The artifact was not just showing information. It was broadcasting a key, a harmonic code that unlocked deeper layers. Jinwoo and Daehyun worked together, combining their different skills. Jinwoo played specific frequencies and Daehyun watched the artifact. Each time a frequency matched the right harmonic, new sections of the crystal illuminated. Symbols that had been invisible became visible. Words that had been hidden appeared. The process took hours. Jinwoo played note after note, searching for the right combinations. When he found one, Daehyun quickly translated the symbols that appeared. His mind worked so fast now that he barely needed to think. The patterns just flowed into understanding. Dr. Mirai and Veltherix stood ready to verify and document every translation. They confirmed each finding before moving to the next. Chronicler Bix recorded everything in his perfect memory. This was too important to risk any mistakes. Finally, after 6 hours of intense work, the survival protocol unlocked. The artifact displayed its complete message. The team gathered around, reading the ancient words that appeared on their screens. The message told a story. The architects were not one species, but a coalition of many different races. They achieved incredible technological advancement together, Eventually, they transcended physical reality entirely, leaving the normal universe behind. They departed voluntarily, peacefully. But before they left, the architects placed these warning beacons throughout the galaxy. They left them for successor species, for civilizations like those that existed now. The beacons warned about the convergence event. The convergence was not an attack. It was a natural cosmic phenomenon that happened every 50 million years. Massive objects beyond the galactic rim collided, creating enormous gravitational waves. These waves disrupted all subspace technology across the entire galaxy. The disruption would last approximately 1,000 years. During that time, faster-than-light travel would be impossible. Communication between star systems would fail. Trade would stop. Every civilization dependent on subspace technology would face sudden isolation. Civilizations that were not prepared would collapse. Planets that depended on food from other worlds would starve. Colonies without self-sufficient resources would die. The social and economic chaos could destroy everything galactic civilization had built. But the architects provided a solution. The survival protocol gave detailed instructions. Stockpile resources on every inhabited world. Establish self-sufficient agricultural and manufacturing systems. Develop alternative forms of faster-than-light travel that did not use subspace. Create redundant communication networks. Most importantly, the protocol emphasized preparation time. With 90 cycles of warning, civilizations could adapt. They could build what they needed. They could survive the isolation and emerge stronger on the other side. But here was the crucial part, the test built into the system. The beacons were deliberately difficult to decode. The architects believed that only civilizations with cognitive diversity deserved to survive. Only societies that valued different ways of thinking would pass the test. Species that became too specialized would fail to decode the warning. They would think in only one way, follow only one method. The beacons required multiple types of minds working together. Mathematical thinking, musical thinking, intuitive thinking, logical thinking, all were necessary. The team sat in silence as they absorbed this information. The irony was almost painful. The galactic academic community nearly failed the test because they were too uniform in their thinking. Despite representing many species, they all thought like scholars. Methodical, careful, specialized. It took a maintenance worker from a death world, someone who thought differently, to pass the architect's trial. Daehyun succeeded not despite his lack of formal training, but because of it. His mind approached problems in ways the trained scholars never considered. Administrator Quellen called an emergency session of the Galactic Council, the governing body that represented all allied civilizations. The team presented their findings through secure channels. The news spread quickly among government officials and military leaders. The reaction was mixed. Some officials panicked. 1,000 years without faster-than-light travel seemed impossible to survive. Others felt relieved. At least the architects were not returning as conquerors. This was a natural disaster they could prepare for. The Galactic Council initiated Protocol Architect, a massive preparation effort. Every member civilization received detailed instructions. They had less than 90 cycles now, and there was much work to do. Ships began transporting resources to colony worlds. Scientists worked on alternative propulsion systems. Engineers built backup communication networks. Farmers expanded agricultural production. It was the largest coordinated effort in galactic history. As preparations began, something else changed too. The way people viewed humans shifted dramatically. Before Daehyun's success, humans were seen as tough workers from a dangerous planet. Not particularly bright, just durable. Now universities across the galaxy started recruiting human professors, not despite their unsophisticated thinking, but because of it. The concept of lateral thinking became a field of study. Alien scholars tried to train themselves to approach problems more like Deathworlders. Human art, music, and literature were re-examined. Things previously dismissed as primitive were now studied for cognitive diversity. Museums displayed human cultural artifacts. Concert halls played human music. Libraries collected human books. But while the galaxy prepared and humans gained new respect, something worried Dr. Mireille. Daehyun's attunement to the artifact grew stronger every day. He could now sense patterns that nobody else detected. He heard harmonics in complete silence. He saw coordinates in his dreams that pointed to real locations in space. The artifact had changed him permanently. His brain was now wired to understand architect technology. This made him invaluable, but it also made him vulnerable. What if the changes continued? What if they went too far? Mirai monitored his health carefully. She told him to rest, to take breaks from the artifact. But Daehyun felt compelled to continue. There was more to learn. He could sense other beacons out there in space calling to him like distant voices. One night, 10 cycles before the convergence, Daehyun woke from a dream more powerful than any before. He saw a massive structure inside the silence, the Forbidden Zone. The vision was so clear, so real. He knew with absolute certainty that there was something there, something important that the galaxy needed to find. Daehyun could not ignore the vision. The image of the structure inside the silence burned in his mind. He knew it was real. He knew it was important, but he also knew that going there was forbidden. The military had declared the silence off limits for good reasons. Ships disappeared there. Equipment failed. It was too dangerous. He talked to Jinwoo first. The younger human listened carefully to his description of the dream. Jinwoo trusted Daehyun completely. If Daehyun said there was something important in the silence, then there was. Jinwoo agreed to help, even knowing it meant breaking regulations. Next, they approached Dr. Veltherix. The Krell scholar was harder to convince. His logical mind struggled with acting on dream visions. But he had learned to trust human intuition. Daehyun had been right about everything so far. Veltherix agreed to join them, but reluctantly. The three of them took a small research vessel without official permission. They left in the middle of the night when station traffic was minimal. By the time Administrator Queln discovered they were gone, the ship was already approaching the edge of the silence. The journey was difficult. As they entered the silence, systems began failing one by one. Navigation became unreliable. Communications went dark. The ship shuddered and groaned. Veltherix's mandibles clicked rapidly with stress. His species did not handle sensory deprivation well, but Daehyun felt calm. His attunement to architect technology guided them. He could sense the right direction, like following a thread through darkness. He told Jinwoo which way to steer. Left, right, straight ahead, slow down. The musician trusted his friend and followed every instruction. After 3 days of careful navigation, they found it. A massive structure floating in the void, larger than any station Daehyun had ever seen. It was made of the same crystal material as the Voidstone artifact, but thousands of times bigger. It glowed faintly with inner light. The structure called to Daehyun so strongly that he felt physical pain if he looked away. Jinwoo piloted their ship closer. They found a docking port that opened automatically when they approached. Something inside recognized them, or recognized Daehyun. They put on protective suits and entered the structure. The inside was vast and beautiful. Corridors stretched in impossible directions. Rooms filled with glowing symbols covered every surface. It felt alive, aware of their presence. Dr. Veltherix examined the symbols with wonder. He said this was a library, an archive of incredible size. But it was organized in a strange way. Different sections required different types of thinking to access. One section displayed pure mathematical equations that Veltherix could read easily. Another section showed musical notations that made sense to Jinwoo. A third section contained patterns that only Daehyun could interpret through intuition. Each person could unlock different parts of the archive. They spent hours exploring, slowly understanding the purpose of this place. The architects had left their complete knowledge here. Everything they learned, everything they created, everything they achieved. It was a gift to successor species, but the gift came with wisdom built into its design. The library could not be accessed by any single species or any single type of mind. It required diversity. Mathematical thinking opened some doors. Musical thinking opened others. Intuitive thinking opened still more. But many sections remained locked, waiting for other kinds of minds to discover them. At the center of the archive, they found a holographic recording. When Daehyun approached, it activated automatically. The image showed multiple beings from different species, all standing together. These were the architects in their final days before transcending. One of them spoke. The words translated automatically into every language the listeners knew. The message was simple but profound. The architects said they were not giving solutions, they were giving tools. They were not demanding that others think like them. They were celebrating that others thought differently. Survival was not about perfection, the architects explained. It was about adaptation. Civilizations thrived not despite their differences, but because of them. This was their legacy. This was the inheritance they left behind. The architects asked to be remembered not as gods or masters, but as students. Students who learned an important truth, though perhaps too late for themselves. The greatest wisdom was knowing you did not have all the answers. The greatest strength was accepting help from minds that thought differently than yours. The hologram faded. The three explorers stood in silence, absorbing what they had heard. Daehyun felt tears in his eyes. The architects had left this message across millions of years and countless light years of space. They wanted future civilizations to avoid their mistakes, to value diversity. To think together, they recorded everything they could. They documented sections of the archive. They copied as much data as their ship could carry. Then they began the difficult journey back to Zenith Station. They arrived just as the convergence began. The timing could not have been closer. The gravitational wave hit the galaxy like a ripple spreading across water. For a brief, terrifying moment, every subspace drive went silent. Every faster-than-light communication channel collapsed. Ships hung motionless between the stars, but the preparations held. The resources were in place. The backup systems activated. Planets remained stable. Civilizations continued functioning even without their normal technology. The galaxy entered its period of isolation, but it did so ready to survive. Administrator Quelon was furious that Daehyun, Jinwoo, and Veltharix had violated regulations. But she was also grateful they succeeded. The discovery of the Architect's archive changed everything. It gave the galaxy hope. It proved that the convergence was survivable. Previous civilizations had faced it and left guidance behind. Dr. Mirai examined Daehyun after his return. The attunement to Architect technology had stabilized. The changes to his brain were permanent, but they were not harmful. He would always be sensitive to these ancient patterns. He would always hear the harmonics that others missed. The Galactic Council declared the archive a protected heritage site. Teams of diverse thinkers would visit it throughout the isolation period. Slowly, carefully, they would unlock its secrets. Mathematics, music, intuition, logic, emotion, and countless other ways of thinking would all be needed. Universities changed their admission policies. They actively recruited students from death worlds and marginalized colonies. They valued cognitive diversity as much as academic achievement. New fields of study emerged, focusing on lateral thinking and cross-cultural problem-solving. Humans became founding members of the Lateral Thinking Institute. They taught classes on pattern recognition, intuitive reasoning, and creative problem-solving. Daehyun occasionally lectured, though he never felt comfortable as a teacher. He preferred hands-on work, solving actual problems rather than talking about theory. Zenith Station was renamed Convergence Memorial Station. It became a symbol of what diverse thinking could achieve, a reminder that no single species, no single way of understanding was sufficient alone. As the galaxy adjusted to its isolation, people looked forward instead of backward. The 1,000-year period would be difficult, but they would emerge changed, stronger, more united, and when faster-than-light travel returned, they would explore the archive together, unlocking knowledge that no single civilization could access alone. 10 years passed after the convergence began. The galaxy adapted to life without faster-than-light travel. Some colonies struggled more than others, but the preparations made survival possible. Trade routes adjusted to slower methods. Communication became more local and independent. Civilizations learned to be self-sufficient again. Daehyun retired from active research when he turned 50. The years of working with architect technology had left him tired. His mind still heard the harmonics and saw the patterns, but he no longer felt compelled to chase them. He had done his part. Now it was time for others to continue the work. He took a consulting position at Convergence Memorial Station. He trained young pattern sensitives, individuals from various species who showed cognitive flexibility similar to his own. Not all of them were human. Some were Krell who thought outside their normal parameters. Others were Nathari, who learned to focus their scattered thoughts. A few were from species that humans had never heard of before. Cognitive diversity became a core value across the galaxy. Universities competed to assemble the most diverse faculty and student bodies. Research teams deliberately included members with radically different ways of thinking. The old academic homogeneity was seen as a dangerous weakness now. The Architect's Archive became the most important pilgrimage site in known space. Every year, new sections unlocked as different types of minds worked together. Mathematical knowledge combined with artistic insight revealed engineering secrets. Musical patterns merged with logical frameworks to expose new physics. Intuitive leaps verified by rigorous testing opened doors that neither approach could open alone. Dr. Veltherix continued working well into his advanced age. The Krell lifespan was long, and he intended to spend all of it learning. He wrote several books about the importance of cognitive humility and the dangers of over-specialization. His most famous work was titled, When the Student Becomes the Teacher. It told the story of how a human maintenance worker taught the galaxy's brightest scholars their most important lesson. Jinwoo became the director of the Harmonic Analysis Institute. He trained thousands of students in the mathematical properties of music and sound. His work helped unlock dozens of new archive sections. He remained close friends with Daehyun throughout his life, often visiting to share meals and memories. Dr. Mirai returned to Earth after 15 years on the station. She established the first Human Cognitive Institute in Seoul, studying how Deathworld survival shaped human thinking. Her research helped other species understand and adapt human problem-solving methods. But she always emphasized that humans were not superior, just different. Every species brought unique cognitive strengths. On a warm afternoon 40 years after the convergence began, Daehyun sat in the memorial garden on the station. The garden was peaceful, filled with plants from dozens of worlds. He came here often to think and rest. His hair was mostly gray now. His movements were slower, but his mind remained sharp, still hearing patterns in the silence. A young Krell student approached him nervously. She was maybe 20 cycles old, her carapace still shiny and new. She carried a data pad and wore the uniform of the academy. Daehyun recognized the look in her eyes. Eager, curious, a little bit afraid. She asked if she could speak with him. Daehyun smiled and gestured to the empty bench beside him. The student sat carefully, her antennae twitching with nervousness. She said her name was Kiva. She was studying pattern recognition and xenopsychology. She wanted to work on the archive someday. Then Kiva asked the question that many young students asked. She wanted to know how Daehyun became so wise. How did he solve the impossible puzzle? How did he change the galaxy? Daehyun laughed. It was a warm human sound that still surprised some aliens even after all these years. He told Kiva that he was not wise. He was just a maintenance engineer who got lucky. He looked at a problem differently than everyone else. That was all. The young Krell looked confused. Her antennae drooped slightly, but he solved the impossible, she said. He discovered the archive. He saved civilizations. Surely that was wisdom. Daehyun shook his head gently. Looking at a problem differently was not wisdom, he explained. It was just perspective. And perspective was something everyone had. You just needed to be brave enough to share yours, even when everyone else thought you were wrong. Especially when everyone else thought you were wrong. He pointed to the statue nearby. It depicted beings from a dozen species standing together in a circle. Each one faced a different direction, looking at the world from their own unique angle. It was a monument to cognitive diversity, created by an artist who survived the first decade of the convergence. Daehyun told Kiva that this was the real lesson, the most important thing he ever learned. They did not all have to look in the same direction. They did not all have to think the same way. They just had to look. They just had to try. And they had to listen when others saw things they did not. The universe was too big and too complex for any one way of thinking, he said. No species had all the answers. No individual was smart enough to understand everything. That was okay. That was how things should be. We figured it out together, or we did not figure it out at all. Kiva sat quietly, processing this. Her antennae moved in patterns that meant deep thought. Finally, she asked what she should do. How should she approach her studies? How should she prepare to work on the archive? Daehyun told her to stay curious, to keep learning, but also to trust her instincts. If she saw a pattern that others missed, she should speak up. If she had an idea that seemed crazy, she should share it anyway. The worst that could happen was being wrong, and being wrong was how everyone learned. Most importantly, he said, she should remember that her way of thinking was valuable. Not better than others, not worse, just different. And difference was the galaxy's greatest strength. Kiva thanked him and left, her steps lighter and more confident. Daehyun watched her go, remembering himself at that age. Young and uncertain, just trying to do his job. He never imagined that looking at some symbols on a crystal would change his entire life, would change the entire galaxy. The sun set slowly behind the gas giant Kolmar 7, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Daehyun sat in the garden as darkness fell, listening to the gentle sounds of alien birds and the distant hum of station machinery. He felt at peace. The architects never returned because they were never really gone. Their legacy lived in every diverse team that worked together, in every unsolved problem approached from a new angle, in every time someone said, "What if we tried thinking about this differently?" The architects taught the galaxy that no single perspective was enough. That answers came from asking questions in many different ways. Civilizations survived not because they were perfect, but because they adapted. They thrived not despite their differences, but because of them. This was the gift the architects left behind. Not technology or power, but wisdom. The wisdom to know that you did not know everything. The wisdom to value voices that sounded different from your own. Somewhere in the galaxy, another young being would look at an impossible puzzle and see a simple pattern. Another perspective would unlock another mystery. Another difference would become a strength. The cycle would continue, generation after generation, as long as civilizations remembered to look in many directions. And on Earth, in cities and villages and schools, children still played pattern recognition games. They counted in dozens sometimes, feeling echoes of ancient customs. They listened to music and felt rhythms in their bones. They trusted their instincts and made intuitive leaps. These children did not know that their simple games carried cosmic importance. They did not know that their Deathworld origins gave them unique cognitive gifts. They just played and learned and grew, developing minds that might one day see patterns that changed everything. Because that was how it always happened. Not with grand declarations or obvious heroes, but with ordinary people looking at problems in their own unique ways, sharing their perspectives, combining their differences, building something together that no one could build alone. Daehyun stood slowly from the bench. His old bones protested, but he smiled at the familiar ache. He had lived a good life, an unexpected life. He changed the galaxy just by being himself, by seeing things the way his human brain naturally saw them. He walked back toward his quarters, ready for dinner and rest. Behind him, the memorial garden remained peaceful. The statue of diverse beings looking in different directions stood silent in the starlight. A reminder, a promise, a hope for the future. The galaxy would endure its isolation. The convergence would end, technology would return, and when it did, civilizations would remember what they learned. That strength came from difference. That wisdom came from humility, that the greatest discoveries happened when minds that thought differently worked together. This was the architect's final lesson. This was their gift. And this was the future they hoped to create. A galaxy that celebrated its diversity, a civilization that valued every perspective, a universe where no voice was dismissed because it sounded strange or different or wrong, because sometimes the strange voice was exactly right. Sometimes, the different perspective solved the impossible problem. Sometimes all you needed was someone willing to look at old symbols with fresh eyes and say,